Welcome, welcome. Andaman walachu.
ده
I don't know how to do
يا
this.
غير المسك.
I think of Sunday school, and then like the teacher comes in, you stand up, and then you say Xavier Masgan.
You have to have the rhythm as well.
Yeah, yeah, and then like just to count the
هناك
syllables.
مسكين من-
ايش
How
كنت
how how
بعمل؟
how do you know about this, Nahum? Weren't you born here?
Nah, nah, I wasn't. I thought people know that, but okay.
I didn't
I
know.
was, I was. This
he
is my
didn't he
origin
didn't see the
story.
last episode.
We did this. Yeah,
I
born and
I
raised in
didn't I didn't
Ethiopia.
know there was an episode.
This is bad rep on you, on you. This is really bad rep on you. But yeah, born and raised Ethiopia, and then came here eight
Okay.
years ago.
Oh wow.
But
Okay.
yeah, just Sunday school. Anytime a teacher walks in, the norm is I don't know if you're familiar, but the norm is just ተነሳለህ ከዛ ኋላ እሺ ማምን ይገባል እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን and then እሺ ቁጭ በሉ እናመሰግናለን and then just yeah.
Mm.
And then it was actually the same thing in high school. I remember it was so weird looking back, remembering now. It would be the same thing, and then Exari Muskan, which is like if we say that in public school now in America, that would be I'd get canceled automatically for mentioning God.
Put him
But
in the special ed.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
I am. We're very glad to have you. Very blessed, honored. Um, and
Oh, I'm supposed to say something. Thank you for having me, and I'm very honored to be here.
I'm good.
No, I really am. Thank you for taking the time, honestly, to talk and to do these podcasts. Haven't been the first one to do it. Thank you. Uh,
You're the
no,
first guest. You're the first guest. I mean, it's very.
no, but I know how much time it takes, and people think it's easy to just like, pop out podcast. It's really not. You got to time it. You got to work with the people's schedules. Some people have classes and they have to cancel their classes to come here. So like, there's a lot of things going on. So I just want to say thank you for taking a
As
time
they
to do
should.
this.
As they should. This is very
Absolutely,
important. Essential to
absolutely.
spiritual life. Millions.
Yeah. So they should cancel class. Got it. Okay.
One at a
So
time.
I'm sure everyone, if anyone is interested in knowing more about Deacon Dawit, they can check out his socials. So all his socials are at D Muluneh, or you can look up Yibel. We're actually just making jokes about Yibel earlier about how amazing people are and how amazingly they've been learning and then completing the course in a timely manner. Um, and so, if you want to learn anything regarding his background, regarding his work, you can look at his publications. One of them is I Need Answers, the other one is Hopeless Romantic, and hopefully more to come. And his socials, look out for his socials on Instagram and every other platform at D Muluneh. All right, so we finished the plug. Back to you.
Yep. Why doesn't he do the intro? Like, for those people, a lot of people know Dagon Dice. Everywhere I go, they tell me, you're like the guy, like Dagon Dice, you teach like him. So like I'm the like they know Dagon.
Let me tell you a true story. So this is after, like, in the middle of COVID. I get invited to teach online. I believe it was in Canada, and they do the prayer and they do the introduction, which is like, this young girl kind of being the host. And she goes, "We're very delighted and excited to have Diakon Dawit." And now I'm kind of feeling myself. I'm like, yeah, yeah, let's go, let's go. And then she goes, "You may have noticed them from the lives from Diakon Gorgorios." So that's actually what's happening on the ground. What's happening on the ground is I'm the guy who goes on Diakon Gorgorios' live. So
Uh,
that's good to know. That's the reality. That's the
For
reality.
those of you who haven't seen him on the lives that I did back COVID season, who's Dagon Dice? Were you also born here at Dagon Dice? What's going on?
Oh man. Yeah, no, I think people know, most of the people know that I was born in Ethiopia. I came here when I was 7 or 8. Very different times, very different times. Um, in terms of even going to church or something like that. I mean, I always tell the young folks, like, if we got close to the Kane Mahalit, like,
Mm.
forget Beit HaMikdash Manam, forget that. Like, if you got close, like on the third row of the Kane Mahalit, people would look at you like you stole something. So I grew up in that environment. I always, tell people, like, I see, the young folks doing mahalit and all this stuff. I didn't know that Kidan was a thing until after I graduated college. I didn't know Kidan was like a prayer on its own, because everything to me was warab or kadase. That's what I called everything.
Yeah.
So, so like Kidan, like a duskalu, I'll be like, they messed up today. Like, isn't that later on? You know what I mean? Like, it's just like I never knew. So like when people are going to mahalates and stuff like that, I'm like, do you guys know what time we're living in? Like, this is crazy. And I was considered, even back in the day, like one of the people that knew more than my peers. So um, yeah, so that's just a little intro.
That's very true. I remember, when I moved here, there was no deacons, young deacons. I think I was like 11 years old. So it's like a miracle to have like young people serve as well. And for us, going to church at 4 and 5:30 was, you're the greatest person in the world. But now you see all these young people, 12 a.m., midnight, 1 a.m. going to mahalit and all these things. Times have has really changed. It's really incredible to see. Yeah.
Yeah. And I bring this up just to say, like, a lot of people think I always grew up in the church, which I did, but it was, always like, regular Sunday school, like most people are doing.
Yeah.
And even when I was teaching, it was like I knew nothing. I mean, I can't, like, I did not know anything. Like Peter and Paul, I didn't know who they were. Like, it was that bad. So when people come to me and say, like, like, I'm too scared to serve or I don't know enough, I'm like, only if you knew.
Yeah.
Only if you knew. Like, this is like in college. I had no idea who was who. Um,
Well, now
so
they know. Now they know. Now they know. Now they know.
yeah.
Beautiful.
So what inspired this transition, from barely knowing anything, not differentiating Paul and Peter, to being one of, our for our days like Paul and like Peter?
So, and this I don't think a lot of people know. So you all would be kind of the first people to hear it.
Yes.
Uh, so when I graduated high school, there was a poet, Nikki Giovanni, and she was talking about having a purpose in this world. And she said, like, her purpose is to be a poet. She's like, I'm a poet before I'm a mother, a daughter, like anything. I'm a poet first. I was like, whoa, that's a little too much. But her whole thing is like, we take from Mother Nature and we don't like kind of give back to this world. So she was like really pressuring us to find out our purpose. Well, that summer of my freshman year, I incorporated a nonprofit, CEO, Children of Ethiopia organization. The F is silent. Children of Ethiopia organization. And this was kind of a nonprofit to collect books and send it back to Ethiopia. And I was starting to become very active in it. I ran for the National Ethiopian Student Association. A lot of people are aware of Ethiopian Student Associations in at local universities.
Yeah.
Well, there's a national one, kind of
Really?
broke apart. Yeah, there was,
Oh,
and it was pretty and just like we would do with UOTY,
yeah.
there were annual conferences for Ethiopian student associations throughout the country. And I was the president of that.
Wow.
I fell apart the year after, but we're not gonna get into that. So I bring all this up to say, near the end of my college career, I was an engineer, and yes, I was getting into the church. I was taking it seriously, but I always thought like my like career would be NGOs. I thought it would be nonprofits. I thought it would be helping Ethiopia in terms of like philanthropy and like like giving back and all these things. And I always said service will be at the back end, whatever is left over.
Mm.
And right after I graduated, like I said, I can't do three things. I can't juggle three things. I can't be an engineer, the nonprofit, and service. So something got to give. And I said, service has to give. And I was going to move to Canada because they had a real good nonprofit program there. I started applying for schools. It was going to be like complete different trajectory. And I remember going to Mariam and looking around DC Mariam and saying, oh my gosh, there's nobody here.
Hmm.
Like there's literally, and this is right after I graduated, and I was like, oh my
What year is
goodness.
this? Just to kind of give us a little bit of context.
This is
Nice.
2011.
Okay.
2011. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. All right. So now I got to come up with a joke like later on. So I'm just gonna start working on that now. But so that's kind of how, like, like I was like, all right, I really got to take the service thing more seriously. So I gave up the nonprofit. Then it was engineering and service, and of course at the end it just became service, and even engineering went away. So yeah, but that was kind of like where my head was at. It started off with this kind of idea of like having a purpose. Then yes, I came to the church and took church more seriously, but I never saw myself like serving in the church. Like I didn't think that the church had a place for me, you know. And shout out to Memphis Gas, who is the first person to say, "Come stand next to me." And I was like, I thought that was illegal, you know, like.
Yeah.
And he had me saying, what is it, tafasi, and my hand would be shaking because like I didn't know what to, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like just a thought of standing next to them, even, I hope they don't mind me saying this, even my parents was like, "Hey, defrata kono," like when I was like starting to make YouTube videos and stuff like that. Like it was something that it was just not an avenue that I could take, you
Mhm.
know. So people really, now it's like normal, and people come up, and I'm always like, I'm so glad to see this, but it was literally a new concept that kind of, shout out again to Abba Filipos, Memeriscas, who literally kind of broke that system to allow us to come in. Because if they weren't there taking the shots on our behalf, we
Yeah.
wouldn't be here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing I love about what you said actually is um, the fact that not only did you have the initiative, but also you had higher ups, let's call them, that were drawing you in. Because I think you need those, like, both aspects, just so you don't end up being, I'm sure everyone is familiar. There are a lot of other powers, other like, let's say, media, people that have their own media station or like their own YouTube channel, whatever, and like they have their own agenda, and we're definitely going to get into that a little bit later as well. Um, and so if there's not that, that let's call it capital T tradition. We talked about this last episode. Um,
What tradition?
Capital T tradition. So like the tradition that we received from the
Oh,
apostles.
capital T. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay. Yes.
yeah. So if we don't have that from our fathers, that drawing us in, just going about it, on our own, as much as it's, it may look good, may not have that, there's that balance, like what you said with your parents, the balance of, okay, like the youth have to come up, but then also the fathers have to draw in, that like balance of both sides. So I want to ask, just as a segue, you know, now you're all booed up, as the current as the current people say, and I noticed that it's been a year. I believe so, right?
It has been a year, over a year, which is
It's been a year.
crazy. Yeah.
My goodness.
A year and
Yeah,
10 days.
and counting.
And counting, yes.
Beautiful. And so, wanted to ask if you have any advice for us, Notis Analel.
I'm writing it
George,
down.
you got it? Yeah. Actual advice, so none of the cliche stuff.
Yeah, so I'll tell you this. I've before I got married, I used to hear things like marriage is just yeah, just, come on, order another one like cheeseburger or something, you know, and then the other one they're like, ooh, marriage, oh my gosh, you know. And I think both of them are extreme ends, and the reality is marriage is one of the scariest, the happiest, the most annoying, the joyful, the you know, like a combination of things that you can get dis and at the end, the good does outweigh the negative. But to start coming out here and to say marriage is just like this picture perfect thing, um, it's misleading to young people because that's what I feel. It's like a lot of people come into, especially in America, like this is a very selfish society, and it is me, 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 and suddenly that kind of goes out to the window, and this me attitude has to go to not even you, but us. So how can you shift? Because it's easy to say you when you're dating. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You can make it about her, or she could make it about him.
Yeah, of course it's you,
But
honey. And then just like,
yeah. You
yeah,
know
the
what I mean?
romanticizing of it, yeah.
It's easy to do that, but it's hard to start thinking of us, because when you think of us, your idea of us and her idea of us is different. Um, so there's a lot of things that need to come together, and everyone everyone has a, what's the word that I'm thinking of? Deal breaker. Everybody has that. I guarantee you those deal breakers will be broken, you know? And what do you do then, right? So these are the things that you have to think about. Now, in spite of that, the beautiful thing about marriage that you can't like replace with anything is having that companionship. Knowing that when you're at your lowest, especially when people get tested, let me tell you, in marriage, you will learn what life looks like. And some people learn that very early on, but a lot of young people haven't been tested, like health wise, mental wise, financially. Um, you know, I know I already said health, but you will see a lot of things that you haven't seen before once you get married, and things that will wake you up automatically, you know. And and for us, when we were going through this thing, that's when you're like, that's why marriage is important.
Mm,
You know, when you're like at your lowest and you're being tested with things that you've never had to think about, and you're like, I can never get through this if my wife wasn't beside me. The arguments, the bittering, the whatever, they go out the window. And
mm,
that's the most beautiful thing about marriage, is when life comes at you, and it does come at you very hard, very hard. You know, thank God that you have someone, um, you know, assuming that you like them a little bit, uh, that you could get you could get through it. So that's what I have to tell people is, you'll experience things, and you want somebody next to you to experience these things, both the good and the bad.
How something that you mentioned earlier, just I want to pull a thread, but I mean it could be an episode of its own, but wanted to see how you can concisely explain how to, for people, for youth, how to not enclose themselves into themselves whenever they deal with that. Because from the way that you explained it, I'm understanding that you deal with a lot of hardships and you need to be a team. But then the society we live in, it's, me, me, me. So if there's an obstacle or some sort of, like, and obviously, it's just your first year, a lot of things may happen in the future, a lot of crazy things may happen. And so how do people go against, or the youth go against, their instinct of self-love, let's say, and then like saving myself first, and then think more, okay, I have another person, even though like this can save me, I have another person now. Like how do they shift that mindset?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I have like a script to give people, like a directional, like this is what you do, A, B, C, D. I would say the general gist of it is, um, a people compare. You've got to stop that. You got to nip it in the bud. So this is the whole TikTok thing telling you how to navigate your marriage. Like I can't stand that. Don't show me YouTube videos about my marriage. I'll come and talk to my wife about how we handle marriage. I don't want anybody in there. When you know fathers say don't include anybody else in your marriage, that includes TikTok videos. And I guarantee you, there are many people right now listening to this podcast that turn to these things for advice instead of going to their significant other and saying, "Hey, we got to talk." I don't care. Even me, like you're listening to this podcast, this is not your instruction manual on how to deal with your relationship. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So
Just
first of
FYI,
all,
we're actually gonna make this into a TikTok so people learn not to use TikTok. So,
Step one, don't
don't use this video to guide your relationship.
yes.
Because I don't know your deal, right? Everybody's different. Everybody's situation is different. So cut out all the noise. Number one. Number two, patience. Like love is patient. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, right? Love is patient. So when these like red flags or and I'm talking about in the context of marriage. I'm not talking about in a relationship when you're dating. If you see somebody doing some weird thing on day number two when you're all dating, that is a red flag. Take it seriously. I'm talking about in marriage, though. Your deal breakers, the whatever. I don't function this. Hey, this is whatever. And you could throw as many biblical verses behind it. You could, try to finesse it like this is about Christ. This is my faith. This is my service. You could do all that and hippity hip hop, whatever. But at the end of the day, you got to be patient with the person. And you got to understand that a person may make a mistake, but you got to go back and it's like, all right, let's keep fighting. Let's keep fighting through this, not with each other, but through this. So I think those are the major things. The third thing that I would say is there's a difference when y'all are doing this and when life is coming at you, right?
Mhm.
My biggest lesson that I took back is you could do this all day, all day. When life comes, you've got to put all that to the side and remember you're a team. If you can't do that, like your personal feelings or whatever, you can't put that to the side and then be there when it counts. That's going to be tough to come back from because you could bicker all day, you could disagree, whatever. Like these things happen. When it counts, if you can't be there, that will test who you are.
Mhm, mhm.
That's the person that matters. And I think these are the things that also are gonna you're gonna look back at it and you're gonna say, okay, this is important, this is not important. We could stay down here all day, but when this comes up, we gotta have our A game on. So when that would be my advice is like cut people out, know that, be patient with the person even when they mess up. And number three, know when it's time to get serious and not, be bottled up with like things that don't really matter. 99% of the stuff that we bigger about don't matter, you know? So it's like when you compare it with life decision things, you know. So that's my advice
and
that
number
you
four,
shouldn't be taking on TikTok.
yeah, number four, don't listen to this. Whatever I just
Don't listen to this.
forget.
Listen to
Forget
this and
everything I
not
just
listen
said.
to this. Basically, yes, yes, yes.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. I the way that you explained it, it kind of brings back my understanding of, or at least from what Saint Paul says about the connection between Christ and the church, and like you are the head of your household, and your wife. So like that analogy, that symbolism, I see that in our faith as well. Something that you've talked about, and honestly, this is one of my favorite sermons of yours. Is the one about love, like UOTY 2018. I will never forget that one. The one about love. It's such a powerful one because underlying everything is love. Underlying everything that we do, and if it's not, then it's non-existent. And so I think about how tawahado in a lot of ways is an intellectual way of understanding love, because love came down, you know, Christ came down and then became he became man for us, for our sake. Um, and so in that regard, I think of the church and the English service, which I believe, you know, the whole YLTZ movement really helped us. It really helped Ahadu Studios, I'm sure, because if it wasn't for, as you said earlier, like that pews, like if you were just in the first three and ten, you'd be uh, you'd be called out. But then now we're at the level of we can sing in English, we can serve in English. There's even a church in English, and so I wanted to ask you what when I think of the church that came up in DC spot. I think of the Mazmur, the old is gone, the new has come, which is a Mazmur that you guys, YTC, came up with. So I wanted to ask, how is your English service in general, and also as specific as it is with YTC, which now became Spot?
Yeah, so one of the things like with Spot that amazes me is the number of people that keep coming. I'm like, why are y'all still here? But every Sunday, it keeps growing. Like, and it's one of those things that, like, people have a lot to say about Spot and their own opinion, but at the end of the day, um, come look at it. That's what I always tell people. Like, and look at literally the transformation that's taking place every Sunday. Every Sunday, these kids are coming to learn. Every Sunday, these this youth, and my brain always kind of goes through like some malfunction because you like see a bunch of people and they're young, and I don't know what to do with that, right? Like, imagine you go to Tabot and all you could see is a bunch of 15 to 30-year olds. Like, you don't know what to do with that. You're like, I can't register that. So it's really amazing because I do think that it's a great, to use it like a scientific term, great case study of like what's going on there, what is working. And I always say, like, you can't copy paste anything. You have to be careful. Um, but you can take the things that work and make it mold into the group that it works in. It may not work. A Spot may not work in Dallas. I don't know. It may or may not. But you can still learn from what Spot did and make it tailor your community that's there. Spot, I think, really worked in a place like DC because we are very big,
Mm-hmm.
and we were growing for a long time. Right before Spot came up, at St. Gabriel, there was 200, 300 people coming every Sunday. So, like we got kind of an estimate. Okay, like this is a regular number of people that are coming. So converting it was like, okay, we will be okay. So, but it's really remarkable, honestly, like to every Sunday to see the growth, and it wasn't a one hit wonder. A lot of the times there's some hype in the beginning, and it just dies down. That's not what this is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's there. Like it's
Yeah.
like every Sunday
I
it's
love
there. So
seeing like the older. I've seen some of the mothers, and
yeah,
some like fathers, like just come in like, and then like the older crowd, and I'm just like, wow, okay, even them, they're supporting like their youth, and then they're coming in, and it's present, and it's like recently, not even like when it first opened, it's like still people are still going.
yep,
Uh,
yep, yep,
it's very
yep.
beautiful.
So it is an amazing sight to see, like when you see it. So like I said, everybody should come and check it out at least once. Some people are like, English is not my thing. Yeah, all right, that's fine. Like, nobody's forcing you to come here, but you should see it though. Just to kind of gauge what's going on. So um,
Experience it
very
definitely.
beautiful. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
for
I think
sure.
I remember someone that used to say that he's actually on this podcast with us. English is not my thing, but here we are years later.
Yeah, I remember that guy too. He thought he was pretty cool. But we're not gonna talk about it right now.
It was my red flag. It's something I grew out of. That as late, so like I a lot of compromise. So when life came at us, now we are together.
That's hilarious.
You know,
Yeah.
every Sunday, you know, one thing I've seen in my parish specifically, every Sunday, it's my fellow deacons usually corner me, and then they do this thing. They're like, "No, why do we do this? No, why do we do that?" And they ask me a lot of questions, and the one thing that all of them say together is, "I need answers now. I need answers now." And so, like, I turn to them, I'm like,
Great transition after. That was a great transition. Oh my goodness. That was amazing. Oh, what a great transition.
What a setup.
Okay. Okay.
and so
I was like, where's he going with this? I was like, what's happening? I'm not here to talk about you.
it's purely me. Yeah, it's just me. And so
That's
I
a
do this
great
little like
transition.
I don't have the book with me as you got on my table, but I do the little thing that if anyone has, I'll put it on the video, the book.
Yeah.
I do the little pose,
Move.
just so people know to be like, oh, where do I know that from? And then just
Ah, that's hilarious.
but I really do think if anyone has not read the book, I Need Answers. A lot of the books and a lot of the questions, even when we put up questions on the account on the Instagram account, it's recurring questions, and it's questions that you've already covered in the first book. So I wonder, do you ever have that instinct to be like when people ask you? Because I've been at YTC once where people ask you would open for questions and they would ask and then it would be already questions that you've covered in the book. Would you steer them in that direction, or would you be like, okay, like let's do this again? Um,
Sometimes I do. If I remember it, especially if I feel like there are just basic things that they're missing. If it's like a specific, I'm not gonna be like, well, I'll read the book, you know. But
yeah.
if I do feel like there's a general misunderstanding of Orthodoxy, then I'm like, okay, this is a good place to start. But you know what's funny is, so some of the things that like using a worldly vocabulary that became successful per se are the things that I didn't really work that hard on.
Mhm.
Um, so I need answers. I wrote it in 2 weeks. Um, and it was out. Of course, it was something that has accumulated over 10 years by doing Sunday school and all that stuff. So some of the questions and stuff I've already answered. So I kind of knew which direction it was going to go. And then people are still reading it like, you know, and very excited about it. On the other spectrum, my second book, Hopeless Romantic, The Untold History of Ethiopia, I put in work in that book, you know? And it's so interesting to see, like, people are like, oh, you read a second book? But,
Was it an answer that you didn't cover in the first one?
but you know,
Well,
it's funny to see how things work because I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just, you know, this is just I marvel at God, right? Because it's not like what you would think is important is whatever He tells you is important. I
yeah.
still think that the book is very important and people should go read it, or maybe the writing skill should change. But I do think that it's interesting that people are still talking about I need answers, and hopeless romantic is like yeah, all right, you know, and you know these
I
things
think
happen. So
people have a little bit of an ick when it comes to history. I don't know. I've noticed that when it comes to purporting like what they think history is, like when they read like that those long articles in Almaringa or in English, but then when it comes to like actually sitting down and reading a full book, the untold, like, and then they're like, oh, like it's a history book, like I'm in school again, and then it's just like
well,
I've noticed that.
you could said that about I need answers because this is a religious book. How many young people are willing to sit down to read a book about I don't know creation? Hopefully, a lot of people, but
You see the plug coming in. Yeah, good
that was
buddy.
from
You
earlier.
yeah,
No,
good
no,
plug.
no.
Good plug.
This is gonna be great. This is gonna be great,
I
honestly.
don't,
But you can say that, right? Like, but if you have something there, and this is where the will of God comes in, right? Like, because you can't predict it. That's one thing. Even I'll tell you, Mariam, I had done 100 things. You know how YC started out? we were like, hey, why don't we just get a bunch of people together, do some sermons and mazmur, see how it works out. Literally, that's how it came up. And then it wasn't something like we have to start like an English mission church and all this stuff. It was like the kids were like, we kind of feel left out. Let's do something. I'm like, well, let's just do some Muslim or whatever. It kind of came out, and here's YOTC, So a lot of the things that we do, we don't know how God is going to use that tomorrow. So I think, the goal is just to put in 100% effort. Yeah, abil maswat adargan, and then God will accept it. So I think that's interesting. Yeah.
I think
Maybe
what you said actually, I love it because I didn't know. I was reading about like why Cain's sacrifice was not accepted and why Abed's was, is because Abel presented it with sincerity and full effort, and Cain
Exactly.
just like haphazardly. Not necessarily that he didn't put in effort, but it was he didn't care. That's really the thing, and we think it's about perfection or seeking perfection, but rather it's just more so about sincerity and effort.
I'm
And
bringing the best that you have, right?
exactly.
I think you're
So
going to be hopeless romantic with the heart of a Cain.
oh, that that one stung a little. Is that
on
where
a,
we're going with this?
no. On a serious note, though, like one thing I want to ask you as well. Maybe I want to see your input. Maybe did we become a generation of clickbait readers only, right? So we read things that are attractive, with attractive titles. Like I need answers. Like what is let's talk about homosexuality, all these things. People automatically want to see your perspective of it. Why do we have to do this? Why do we have? It's like a clickbait things we're very interested in, and then something that is concrete. And something that is foundational, a lot of us kind of avoid from it. Is this, halting our spiritual growth? And that's my biggest fear as well. I see a lot of people struggle with it. I see myself struggling with it as well. When it's like easy topic, simple topic I can relate to, it's easy for me to listen to read as well. But if the topic is, maybe spiritually challenging, sometimes we, avoid these things. Do you think it's a matter of that, or it's something else?
አሁን ለምሳሌ ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ሁልጊዜ የሚባለው አንድ ሰባኪና አንድ ሊቅ አጠገብ ላጠገብ ብታደርግ people are going to
Yeah,
want the ሰባኪ, like,
yeah,
because it's like, entertaining or whatever. I will say though, if you look at like the New Testament, St. Paul's service in the book of Acts, chapter 17, when he goes down there,
mm,
he sees a God that doesn't exist, and his first sermon is, let me teach you about the unknown God, right? So that's clickbait in a way, because
yeah,
what he's doing is he's relating with the people, his community, and I think Subkata Zadi, one of the first things that you learn is you've got to know your audience. And it's okay to, but it has to be balanced. And that's where I come with you.
yeah,
Is if you're trying to keep people entertained, you're trying to have people, be interested in it. That's what Kene is after all, right? Like you're
yeah,
trying to, the sum is supposed to be something people can relate with. Why
yeah,
did Jesus? I used to have a teacher that used to say, if Jesus lived today, like the parables would have been about burgers and computers. Why did
yeah,
he do fish? It's because they were fishermen, right? Like a lot of the examples are in a way that people can understand. So I think that if it's just clickbait and there is no substance, that's the problem. And I do see that. And by the way, maybe I should say this now. I've said this a couple of times. I got myself in trouble, so I'm just going to keep saying it. Um, uh, I see a lot of programs throughout the nation campaigning on the backs of children. የልጆች ፕሮግራም አለ
mm,
ኑና መዝግቡ ልጆችን እናስተምራለን ምናምን and I'm like, that's okay. Like that's the more the merrier, right? Like
yeah,
I don't mind it.
yeah, yeah,
But when you go into the program, there's nothing there, right? It's
yeah,
just like a money making industry now. Cuz how, like ለቤት ለህንፃ ገንዘብ ስጡ, it's not working. people are going and saying we need our demos increased, it's not working anymore. So what's the new kind of strategy? ልጆችን ልናስተምር ነው, and which is great. Like I'm all for it, but
Yeah.
then teach the kids seriously. Don't play around and do things. So like I think the best example of the good way would be places like Dallas. You have like Beta Tekle, like literally he's transforming. Somebody should do a documentary on him because the
Yeah.
thing that he's doing is genius level.
Yeah.
To get people to like Mahalit, not to learn it, but to like it.
Yeah.
So you have like programs like this. What you're doing with your programs, there are programs that are really, you have the person who can actually do the thing. Fine. I go back to what I was saying is you have clickbaits to get recognition, to get whatever. But then marketing is important, and I think even if we look at the way that St. Paul was teaching, that is a form of marketing, to use the secular terminology. So,
Yeah.
I'm not against like creative styles. In fact, I live on it, and I think that's important. So don't get mad because my titles are at work. Don't get mad at that.
Yeah. Maybe you have to revert back to I need answers and do a part three. I think because I mean, hopeless romantic in a lot of ways. When I read it, even when I listened to the podcast. By the way, everyone should check out the podcast if they're not willing to read the book, or buy the book. But one thing I noticed is a lot of the questions that arose in my mind that weren't answered by those long posts that people would post about Ethiopia, or all the lives or whatever. It's the fact that there's that pursuit of truth, and then like just you kind of led me through that as I read it, and I'm sure everyone felt like that when they read the book. And so the question for you is,
Go ahead.
did you have something to say?
No, I was just gonna say like in terms of I need answers. At the time, I don't. I like you said. I think the problem is people are ready, and maybe this is a good transition to another thing. But like, people don't want to read, don't want to put in the work, don't want to learn, but have opinions about something. And in some ways, it's like it doesn't matter how you feed in that information. Um, uh, and because this is not just a historical book, and like now, even my career, it's funny that my brother's wife was saying this to me, because I kind of came full circle when I started this podcast. I told you my mission was to like NGOs and like helping the country, and why are there all these poor people, and now I'm kind of merging everything together with even kind of the engineering aspect of like the online platform and how my brain is thinking with the spiritual and with this historical aspect that people don't understand how much the historical aspect is actually framing our spiritual environment. And when you learn more of the history, you kind of cement yourself in where you are. So I need answers gives you kind of the circle. This is the circle that you're in. The historical aspect tells you how the circle came about. Why is it here to begin with? And I do kind of think that they're related. All I'll say is, I urge people to read it, and I do see kind of spin-offs coming from both of the books. Actually, I do have a few projects in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait. We really can't wait to see the. For a lot of us, like you mentioned it earlier as well, and I think this is a good segue into one of the projects that you're speaking of. A lot of us, we've had questions, people asking about the other like faith based ministries that kind of come at the Tawahido faith, from the angle of, okay, so the angle of Ta'ammara Mara. And it's usually from a perspective of, okay, they see like this the exterior, and they're like, oh, you guys worship Saint Mary, Becca. Like you worship her, Maknatum, you do all this, and then you say this, and then you say that, and then so that means you worship her. You exalt her above God, and so that there's that narrative that's like pervasive. One symptom of what you mentioned just now, and so with that in mind, I know I believe if anyone's not familiar, you're doing a project with Princeton University in translating the miracles of Mary. So just while you talk about that, just also keeping in mind, like, is that true? That aspect of to incite people to look into this more and like actually sit down and put in the effort and read. Is it actually true? Does the Tawahid faith believe that the miracles of Mary is superior to everything, the Bible, everything, or is there like a different true like an actual narrative going on that's
So
unbiased?
there's several things going on here, and number one, you have to understand that as the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, like our dogma, our canon, is guided by the Bible. So we always say the Bible is number one, the Word of God, and then everything else kind of sits on the Bible, and the Bible is mizan. So uh, because mizan salahona, it goes through the Bible to judge if this is something that should be as a, what we call awalid mazahab, secondary books to assist the Bible. That's the first thing. The second thing is all these awalid mazahab. So Ta'amira Maryam is considered awalid, a child of the Bible. So when we talk about these things and we're reading these books, we have to understand, like, I had a professor who always said, like, rather than the context of like the text of what it's saying, she's like, I'm always interested in why did they write it and whom did they write it to. And I think that's a more interesting question, right? Because if you ለምሳሌ አንድ ቀን ያለ ዘሩ ጠፋብኝና but it's something like, is John going crazy because he pushed Jesus into the water? That's an amazing kane. You know what I mean? But if you're just like reading it, you're like, Johannes crazy no lakas. If you're reading it historically, did you know Johannes is crazy? Little not, like, because you don't understand it's kane, it's metaphors. So what is this, right? If you're looking at, I don't know, like Power Rangers, and you think it's a historical documentary, you're gonna have a very like weirded out kind of perception of history, right? Power Rangers is not meant to be a historical document. Ta'amira Maryam is not meant to be a historical document. It's not. It's meant to write and motivate people's faith of the miracles that she performed. But some of these miracles performed could be written metaphorically. It could be written kind of using writing rhetorics that incites people. Keep in mind, we were living in an era before Netflix, before YouTube, before all these things that we have around us. So in order to captivate the minds of people, there are different writing styles that are incorporated to get the attention of the people. That doesn't mean it's historical. That doesn't mean that it goes against the Bible. Now, I'm not the one to judge what is historical, what's not historical. I'm not the one to judge what is metaphorical, what is not metaphorical. There's a group of Yelikant Gubae who can come down and tell us, hey, let's review these things. Let's talk about these things. And there's actually a big movement to say, let's do these things. We just haven't had the time because there's a bunch of stuff happening. But these books are not meant to substitute our knowledge about Orthodoxy. We have the Bible for that. We have Hamanot Abo for that. So the way that we interact with Ta'amira Maryam is we read it for motivation and recognition that Mary does indeed perform miracles, because we believe that. We don't need Ta'amira Maryam to prove that to us. We know that in our life. We have people coming every day saying, look at the miracles that Mary has done. What the miracles of Mary does is it does motivate us. In fact, if you read Ta'amira Maryam, near the end, there's homilies that say, Sim'a, زنت تعمرة زجبرت Maryam, right? So listen to this miracle that Mary has done. Now, if you are faithful to her, like they were as well, you get the miracle. So it's meant to be motivational for us. And a lot of people, the way you read it matters. And that's where I think, we saw Pastor Jonathan coming out and reading a few things from Gedlat and all these things. So that's where it comes from, is not even knowing how you're supposed to interact with these books. I don't know if I answered these questions.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think you answered it. I want to share a quick funny anecdote. A few years ago, actually a couple of years ago, let's say like 10 years ago, 2011. Let's say 2011. Um, I I would hear a lot of these Talmuds, and the one that's really common is the one about the 5 stars of the Virgin Mary. They actually made an icon about it in the Catholic Church. So the Amislu Hazanat. So if anyone is interested, they can look into the Princeton website to look into the specifics. So basically, as long as you remember the Amislu Hazanat and then pray Abu Nazar Samat, all your sins will be forgiven. Is the Al Kidan. And so me, being the smart guy, I grew up being told, okay, you have to confess your sins to a priest. But I said, oh, loophole. all I have to do, all I have to do is just, pick that and then just pray the prayer and then I'm good. But obviously, I mean, that's not the case. Like I messed up the order because, it came from my personal interpretation of it rather than like the following the hierarchy, the levels. And in that regard, we see, as you said, Lik'an Dukubaye, which is the council of our fathers, of our scholars back in Ethiopia that can clarify this for us. And a lot of fathers that can clarify this for us if we actually sit down to ask them, or if we just simply, look into the history of the church and see like what really, like what's the hierarchy here, like what do we follow here.
But I do want to take the time to say, like, people who are interested to read Miracles of Mary, you can go to, let me see, pem.princeton.edu. That's PEMM.princeton.edu. You could read stories. You can check out beautiful paintings of Tamir Mariam. I think they're really remarkable. So one of the things that I always say here is, they're not Ethiopian priests that worked on this. They're Westerners. So you could take that for whatever it means. But the data points are there. The data points of the Miracles of Mary is there. And a lot of work has been done. Now it's up to us to use it for good or for bad. That's for every individual. But I do think it's remarkable. We've cataloged. Let me ask you, what's the biggest number of miracles that you've seen in a text?
George?
I'm not sure.
It's usually like የመቶአንዱ ነው ብዙ ጊዜ የሚጠቀሙት.
Yeah.
And then you always find like a priest or two who's like, እኔ የሶስት መቶ አለኝ እኮ. You always find one of them, like, you know what I mean? Like I'm in it with the cool group. So we ended up identifying over 1,000 miracles, which is insane, because that means there's a lot of miracles that we've never heard of. In fact, what is it? Over, I think, 70 manuscripts, we found one miracle just in that text. One miracle. You can't find it anywhere else, right? So these are fascinating things that I think, and this goes back to the Hopeless Romantic book. We have got to be active in our story. And this is the thing that I've been working behind, behind the curtains, the doors, the window, whatever.
The scenes?
Behind the scenes. Thank you. That's why it's a group effort. That, and one day that, it'll come out. But I'm trying to get us as Ethiopians to be active participants in telling our story. I'll tell you something that happened recently. I hope I don't get in trouble because I know some people might be hearing this. There's a conference that's being organized by Americans at a university. And I'm one of the people collaborating and working with them to get this conference told. When the conference started, it was all Americans that were going to present on Ethiopia. And I said, that's wrong, right? So let's get more Ethiopians to participate in telling the story. The problem is nobody's willing to do it. You see? Or people would say, who's there? Nobody knows these things. Like, who could do these things? So the issue is we've got to be active. I don't want to be told what my history about Tamil and Mariam is. Why is Princeton doing this project? We could have done this project, right? But we've got to be more active. Like, now the data points are out there. Everything is out there. So we've got to be the ones active to start reading it. Then we could have spin-offs. We could have a project similar to this, Tamira Jesus, Gadla Takla Haimano, to Dusana Mikael, and we get to know what we call the body of knowledge that's out there in the Ethiopian Orthodox Order Church. If we don't do that, I promise you other people are doing it for us. Like, you're getting the trickle-down effect, and a lot of the times when people pick up a book or some study or something like that, it's been translated from Arabic, from whatever, because somebody else did that work. So that has to stop. That has to stop.
To kind of specify the point that you made just now, so there's not a clear path. One thing I noticed, like at home,
A clear path to what?
To let's say at home for the position that you're in right now, like at home, for example, growing up, we would be told, okay, go to Harvard, and then and then get a doctor, be a doctor or a computer science engineer, and then that's the the path, and even that's popularized. That's usually like the pretty paved path. But where do you think people can get more information into being involved in this if they are interested? Like, where do you think, besides like with PMM, like how can they be more immersed in it rather than just being a spectator?
So you said it perfectly. There's nothing out there. I'm like literally, like, we're creating this, and George is another person as well, right? Like, we're literally creating new ideas. It's not out there. The concept of teaching online wasn't out there until like 2 years ago, right? In my understanding, George is the first person to do it. This concept of, like, let's utilize the technology that we have in order to do these things. The same way with what's going on at the university level, getting people involved. So what we can do is we can do our part, and hopefully in a few years, when we're kind of at a level where we can start communicating, we can work together. For example, I'll tell you, I have over $100,000 debt. Day one, when I went to school and I told them I was learning Ge'ez and I wanted to do this, but it was too much to call. You know what they said? Why don't you ask your church? Like, I laughed, because all the other people are being paid for by their by their churches, and here we are. Nobody cares, and nobody cares. And the same way that I started off Sunday school, my Sunday school teaching idea was, I don't want anybody to work this hard to hear the word of God. Because I had to go to YouTube and drive hours away to hear somebody teach whatever. I was like, I don't want this ever to happen. If somebody wants to hear the word of God, they should be able to get it easily in a language they understand. This is the same thing now. If someone is going to put in time to serve their church, I don't want anybody else to go through what I went through, because I know what I went through. But it's not fair when somebody's like, I want my career to be to serve in the church. They shouldn't have to be penalized at this level. Yes, there's sacrifices. Yes, there's things they have to give. But it shouldn't be to this level that their whole life is kind of upside down. Right? So, but the way that we do this is, number one, being more active. Really, like when their service is showing up, when there are things being shared, helping out, when there are programs to sign up for, signing up for them. These things absolutely hint. They absolutely help. I was telling people, let's get into it. So when we're talking about UL, I was telling people, even if you don't want to learn good, sign up, because it helps. Because like that, let's be more direct than this. The money that I get from UL is used to finance the next project, right? So people want to see more things. Well, yeah, then you got to help. You got to show up, right? It's not enough to be like, good luck, attaboy. Because I know the struggle that goes into doing the things that, we're doing. So, that's just, that's a little something, something.
Oh,
Beautiful.
you're like,
I can,
we're just holding yourself back. I was like, okay, let me calm down.
I can keep going. I'm getting warmed up.
Yeah,
I
that is
think
very true. Like these things take a lot of effort, a lot of energy. A lot of people assume, just the 5 minute sermon or the 10 minute program that you have. But behind all those things, there are hours, if not days, if not weeks, months of hard work to put those things together and present it. Right, like he mentioned, just say, "Oh, great job." Xavier Asadig is like, it's great. We love the blessing, but you also need the support. And even the biggest problem in our church is that people assume whenever we do anything programs like this, automatically people assume like, oh, it's just milking money, wealth in the name of the church. And like that's my biggest fear as well. Whenever I offer anything, I'm like, I don't want to be that person. For example, when we released the album, I know how much work it took to make that album, but I couldn't, like, for the love of God, couldn't release it in that way, like, where I'm like, come, because I don't want people to be like, oh, he's feeding off of the church and all these things. That's a big fear that we have as well. With the same thing with you as well. So, how can we possibly change that mindset so that projects like this are supported not just verbally but also financially in order for the programs and these educational platforms to grow even more.
Yeah, so go ahead, Nahum. I don't know if
No,
you
I
want
was
to.
just gonna say, um, perpetuating this conversation and just continuing this conversation is definitely part of it. In that, like Ahon, with what you said, Jack Ondait, it's very important for people to have it in the back of their head because usually it takes a while. Like even with what you said with Saint Paul had to fight, with a lot of, just the Corinthians and then other, as he was serving, he himself said, I had to go down to the level of the pagans. I had to go down to the level of whoever I was serving so that I can meet them where they're at and then take them there. But then to take them there, it's not like a one night. Obviously, it's going to take a lot of, what you said earlier, whatever it is that you're going through. Like, and you just mentioned like the piece of the iceberg for us. All of that is going to culminate towards leaving a legacy for people to, feed into, and then hopefully help even more people. And so, preparing that conversation, I think, is definitely part of it.
Absolutely. So I'll say, I remember like a few years back, um, I was doing Uber. That's how I made a living, and I was very much like, I don't want to take anything. I'm here to serve. I've served my whole life. By the way, I've never been hired by a church. I've never gotten a single paycheck from a church. When I serve, if I go out of state, whatever, yes, they give me something. But throughout the services that I give, I've never been paid for anything. And it's so funny. People are like, "Lenav sachu velachu agargulu." That's really like what people say. People don't know about the hours of phone calls I have with parents, consulting, helping them out. People don't know these things, right? Usually when people call me for a service, they're like, Indo arba dakika online and kwan arba dakika. I'm like, for that 40 minute to stick for a sermon, I got to prepare for 5 to 10 hours ahead of time, and that's what people are not seeing, right? And that's fine. Uh, Yibet, we talked about Yibet. I started working on Yibet in December of 2022. I finished it in April of 2023. It's December, January, February, March, April. That's 5 months. In 5 months, this is all I did. Woke up every day, just worked on it. Woke up every day, just worked on it. Woke up every day, just worked on it. With the concept that I really believe this will help people. Anyone who's gone through the program, who's actually done it, and who wants to learn this, I I will say boldly, find me a better program than this. I'll say boldly. There isn't. I've done several languages. I've done Arabic. I've done Coptic. I've done Greek. Just want to show off a little bit.
Hmm.
So I've done all these languages in different programs. There's nothing out there that can compare to this. Um, so you put in this work, but at the same time, what people don't understand is that year, that semester, I was about to drop out of school. I had no income. I was just married. I was just nothing. And their bills are a real thing. You see what I'm saying? So you have to make a decision. Do I continue to serve? And people demand, hey, can you come talk to my kid? Hey, can you teach this? Can you do that? Can you give more to the generation? Now I'm like, I can't live. I'm just trying to figure out how to provide for my family, and people really don't understand these things. I will say I have to go. I know they probably don't want me to say their name, but there were a group of Sunday school kids that came through and helped out. If it wasn't for them, I would have dropped out of school. It was like done. It was finished. I was gonna go back to engineering, put my kamis down, and provide for my family. It was that close. People don't understand this.
Oh,
You see what I'm saying?
yeah.
Now I could say, thank God, everything has changed. Don't Venmo me, like I'm good. Exactly, Mexican. But at the same time, when Yubel was registering, we were talking about this before. People are complaining about the payments, and it's like, okay, so 5 to 6 months of no, like, not no income, like zero, right? So at the end of that, how am I supposed to make a living? If people want this for free, that means I can never serve again at this capacity, right? Like all the things that people like, I need answers. People have benefited from that. So we can't do the things that we're doing if we can't live. We have to live first. And some people have a very hard time understanding this concept. We're not rich. We have a life of our own. We all have family. Like I said, there are health things that come up that shake you to the core. You don't
Hmm.
know what to do. There are a lot of things behind the scenes that people don't know about. But people want free service. Now, I'll tell you, I was at a cruise to celebrate the 1 year anniversary with my beautiful wife. And I get to complain on the cruise because they're a large organization. Go complain over there. We're not that. We're not this big corporation that we have what is it called? You call for the service for complaining and all these things, and you get
Customer service,
50%
yeah.
discount. Customer service. We don't have that, right? We're individuals trying to figure out how to live in this life. Go ahead.
I was just saying it's Jesus, 'cause that's our.
Our corporation is Jesus. And there's this like really confusion, I think, of monks and deacons or even priests. Now monks go after them. I mean, they've given up their life.
Don't let them go. Do not let them go. Just go.
But they've given up their whole world, and like like they've said like the ale mochalo. So yeah, if you see a monk saying I want to drive BMW or something, like, why, right? But priests and deacons, they have a family to take care of, and the teaching is kasaw batachatun, kasaw balatun. So if we're walking around, with a nice shape up and a beard and all this, like all the way down, and it just like trying to look all good, like all that, some people doing that. So like then maybe there's an issue there, but but like people, we've got to live, and it's either we keep doing the things that we're doing and we get supported, or we have to stop and say, okay, I got to think for myself, I got to think for my family, and we walk away, which by definition means you're walking away from the service that you could be doing, because you can't do it both ways, and that's what I think people have to understand.
Makes sense.
Very much so, and I believe it's safe to say that um, we we will continue to have these conversations, and you're definitely a friend of Tawhado, a child of Tawhado, so you're definitely a friend of the podcast. Dawit today plugin. Um, so yeah, we definitely will continue to have these conversations, and it's very important for us to. I think of home with what you said earlier just now, like something has to give. I think of the and what Saint Paul again said about the body and us being the body and Christ being the head. Like one of the organs or one of the parts of the body is hurting, and we're just expecting it to go away. It's like, oh, I have cancer. Oh, whoop de doo, and then just go home, and then act like nothing's going on. That's definitely what we're doing if we're not keeping that in our minds, remembering the fact that this is a necessary project that we have to invest into as a whole, as a part of the Tawahid community. Glad to have you. Very, very glad to have you. And
Thank you for
hopefully
having me.
there's a next time. Arale? You know what I.
But most definitely, most
Yeah.
definitely. Honestly,
I see.
we're grateful.
Yeah.
Also, this is the best podcast in the game right now. I dare you to find me a podcast better than this.
Beautiful.
No, honestly, it's always an honor and a joy to have Dagon Dawit anywhere. It's always just a fun conversation. You have fun at the same time. You learn so many deep and wisdom-filled things. So we're truly grateful to have you. I think we're just gonna call this part one with Dagon Dawit, and then we'll have to do a part two sometime soon whenever he has a free time. Truly, thank you for making time for us. There's a lot of projects on this hand. Literally dropped out of class to join. You dropped out of class just to join. You better. Thank you. Truly grateful.
All right. Till next
Thank
time.
you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right.